Cooking Japanese favorites series. Tonight is the first in our series, and we'll be learning how to make sushi hand rolls. My name is Lonnie Taylor, and I'm an AARP Hawaii volunteer. I'll be your host tonight. On behalf of our sponsors, Kaunoa Senior Services on Maui, Uala Leaf Cafe at Windward Community College, and AARP Hawaii, welcome. For those of you who are new or who may be unfamiliar with AARP Hawaii, we are a membership organization for people 50 and older, but what we do for everyone. We hope that with this series, you can learn some techniques that you can use to build or maintain a healthy lifestyle. Let's do a bit of housekeeping. This is a picture of what you should be seeing at the bottom of your Zoom screen on a PC and possibly the top of the screen on an iPad. Everybody is currently on mute. If you want to submit a question or comment, please click on the button that says Q&A and type in your question. I will be monitoring the questions and making sure they get asked. If you're watching on Facebook Live, you may type your questions in the comments. We won't be using the raise hand command because questions will be submitted in the Q&A. The chat command also isn't necessarily going to be used unless you want to communicate a technical issue. Alice Swift, Dave DeWitt, and Jackie Bolin are standing by to help. We recommend that you select speaker side-by-side view rather than gallery view for this presentation. To do this by clicking on the upper right part of your screen. Once you are in that view, you can change the size of the slides or of the speaker simply by clicking and dragging on the middle bar. Finally, we have added closed captioning to this presentation for those who have difficulty hearing. You can turn this off on your end by clicking on the CC Live transcript button in the lower right side of your screen and clicking on Hide Subtitle. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Chef Daniel Swift, who will be leading us through this cooking series.
Mahalo, Lonnie. Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, awesome. You never know. When you click, you cross your fingers and hope. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us again tonight. Obviously, we're, as was mentioned earlier, kicking off our series, excuse me, for this entire month, where we'll be focusing on Japanese cuisine. Tonight is hand rolls. Next week, we're doing nigiri and maki rolls. So it'll build a little bit on what we do this evening. And then we have a healthy twist on karaage. A couple little sides with that, and onomiyagi in the last class, I think, for the month. So tonight, what I wanted to do for sure is to make sure that we kind of focus on the primary ingredients that go into hand rolls. It's broken up into a couple different categories. Once we tackle the rice, we can move on to the vinegar. We'll talk about the ingredients, and then we have a bunch of different items that are pre-prepared just because of time to allow us to just practice doing the rolls. So that's probably the most challenging part, is just, getting a few rolls under your belt and figuring out the technique to get them lined up and get them perfect. So I don't make these every day. Thankfully, Steve Mayashiro, who works in the kitchen here, teaches Japanese series on campus, which is really popular. And I work as his assistant. So it sort of flashed me back to the time that I spent making sushi and working at the sushi bar when the Kahala Mandarin opened in Hoku. So it's not something I do every day, but it doesn't have to be something that you do every day. And that being said, it's important, I think, for some of the techniques and the items that we cover over the course of this series to acknowledge and recognize that it's an art form. Whether we're talking about sushi making or whether we're talking about sauces and classical cuisine or pasta, there's just, a limitless amount of areas within the food and beverage industry and in the kitchen in particular, where people will dedicate an entire lifetime to perfecting the art of a particular genre. And in this case, it's sort of a sacred technique and role for people to play when they're jumping into the arena of sushi making and stuff. But we want to sort of strip that away. There's my rice right on time. So I'll stop that. So we want to kind of take away the complexity of it. And I hope that over the course of this series, you know, folks have realized that it's okay to experiment. It's okay to try something new and different. It's okay to look at ingredients that you haven't used before. And there's nothing wrong with making a mistake in the kitchen. So a lot of these things take a little bit of practice. And if you're afraid to jump in and make a mistake, then you won't be able to get the practices that's necessary to lead to success later on. The recipe did go out. I wanted to point out a couple of things. So I don't know, some of you may have it. Some of you may be utilizing it. When I wrote this recipe, it was based on one that we do with brown rice. So the water quantity here is a little bit higher. And I'll talk about the process as we go through the making and the washing and the soaking of the rice, which is an important part. But if you have that recipe, it's really geared for white rice, or excuse me, for brown rice. If you want to use white rice, you would scale back about a half a cup or so on the water. Same process, just a little bit different. So just keep that in mind. So what we'll do first is kind of get the vinegar going. It's super simple, and the recipe was provided for that. Really, basically what it is a rice vinegar. There's a bunch of different brands. You can pick up whichever one's your favorite. A little bit of salt is going into that. Some kombu, just a piece of dried seaweed kombu. You can pick that up in the supermarket as well. And then normally it's sugar. I've made it with sugar, but this particular recipe tonight, I'm going to make it with monk fruit, which is a sugar substitute. So any of those sugar substitutes, if you follow the instructions, we've used a lot of them over the course of this class or this series. Just follow the ratio substitutions that are generally listed on the package, and then go by taste, whatever works for you. So you may even wish to omit the salt. It's totally up to you. You could go with, honestly, a straight white rice with a little bit of vinegar, but the sweetness takes off that edge for me, and I tend to like it like that. And then kombu can be done with the rice, or it can be done with the stew, or sometimes it's done with both. Tonight, demo set up for both. And it looks like I just lost my camera. Hang on a second.
We can see your close-up camera, Dan.
Okay, just not the other one?
Correct.
All right, well, that works. I'll also work on that while I go over these ingredients. So basically, for what we're looking to do with these is just simply dissolve the granules of the sugar and or substitute and the salt in the vinegar. And to do that, it has to be heated a little bit. So I just have a pot here on the recipe. You can use the microwave. That works just as well. I'm going to throw all the ingredients in this pot. I'm going to turn it on medium high. I don't want it to boil and reduce the vinegar. What I'm looking to do is just dissolve the salt and the sugar. So that's in there, and it'll also pull out the flavor from the seaweed. I can just set that there. So it's just in here, and it only takes a second. We just need to warm it up. Like I said, don't boil it. We did do a vinegar reduction earlier in our series with balsamic, where we reduced it and got rid of the water, some of the acidity, and then made a nice syrup. We're not looking for that here. We just want to dissolve the salt and the sugar. And with, a minute or two of that heating up, it'll be finished. That'll give us a chance to then just move over and look at the rice really quick. This is a short grain rice for this recipe, and always when we're doing sushi rice. So what we want to do is make sure that we get a nice short grain rice. Usually at the supermarket, you have no problem finding it. The ratios for water, depending on the process that you go through, as I said earlier, can be as low as 1 to 1 when we go to the cooking and as high as maybe 1.5, just depending on the age of the rice, how it's stored, the moisture content, whether you soak it and things like that. So in that case, when we're making that, it's just the rice, the kombu, and this would be optional. If you're using it in the soup, you don't necessarily have to have it in the rice, but as I'll show you, I put it in the rice as well. And then just the water. So I'll go through the process of washing that. I just wanted to make sure everybody saw the sort of setup for the rice cooking. And then the other thing, when I was picking up vegetables at the store today, someone had left these on the shelf next to the furikake and some of the other things. And I'm like, oh, you know, I didn't think about whether or not you can use this to substitute for going through the process of washing and whatnot. And if you're in a real hurry and you wanted to switch to and try a brown rice, or this is a long grain rice, but they do make the short grain. We eat these at home a fair amount when we're in a hurry, but everything's pre-prepared. You would simply just crack it, microwave that rice, turn it out, and then use the vinegar on that rice, and you'd be ready to go. So that would eliminate a lot of time in the washing process, which you're going to see here in a second. So I grabbed them since they were on the shelf. I didn't have a time today to practice that, but I'm certain that that would work well for the hand rolls and the maki rolls that we'll be doing next week. So something to think about. We're always trying to think fast, healthy, and ono. So that might be interesting. I'm going to try it later, not tonight, but probably tomorrow. And if you try that at home, email me, let me know how it turns out. Hopefully it'll work great. So, and a nice opportunity to go with a brown rice. So it's pre-cooked already and ready to go. All right, so the rice is done. I want to turn it out here in a second, but I want to show the process for washing. And what we have here is that same short grain rice. I want to wash it to remove all of the starch. So I'm going to add a little bit of water and I'm going to stir it. And most people are doing this at home anyway. So this is nothing new. You're basically moving the rice in the water and you'll see it start to cloud up. It's washing all of those starch granules that are stuck on the outside of the grain. Straining that out. I think I just lost the camera again now. So I'm going to hit it with a little bit more water. Usually we do this 2 to 3 times, and you can see that the water gets nice and cloudy, and that's the starch that we're removing, which is what we really want to make sure that we do. And then I'm going to strain it. And I'm going to repeat that one more time. I want to try to get all of that off the outside of the rice. So this is cold water. I'm going to add a little bit more the second time. And depending on the level of complexity that you'd like to put into your rice, this might be done 3 times. And then as the recipe states, it is also then soaked. What Steve does, and I worked at a Japanese restaurant years ago in Seattle, we would put it in the sink in a bowl and just have a small trickle of water running over it for about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes longer, depending on the size of the batch. And that basically removes all of that starch, so we don't have to come back and worry about it later on. Actually, in the restaurant, we would then store it overnight in the refrigerator to allow it to dry out a little bit, and then it was used to cook for the sushi bar. So you can see that we've got a lot of starch washed out from that rice, and that's what we don't want. Now, could this be used for something else, a soup or a porridge or something? Certainly, but for what we're doing tonight, we don't want that water in there. So I'll just set this aside.
Chef Daniel,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question from Eva. What will be the difference if long grain rice is used?
Long grain rice doesn't have as much starch, so it might not be as complicated to wash, but it also won't give you as sticky, depending on the type of long grain rice, as sticky finished product. So you have to maybe use a little bit more of the sushi vinegar to bind it together. But you know, the grains are about twice as long, sometimes a little bit more, and they're not as sticky. They don't have that gumminess. So you could look at Thai rice, which is really sticky, the glutinous rice, and that's almost not workable because it can be too sticky when it's finished. So finding the balance of starch is probably more important than the length of the grain per se, but you just have to experiment a little bit. And then on the vinegar too, we're making our own, but I did want, and that's just done with a genuine straight up rice vinegar. But they also make one that's already seasoned. So if you wanted to skip this process and just go straight to a seasoned vinegar, it will already have the salt, a little bit of sugar in it, and it's already flavored. So, there's a couple steps along this process that we're going through in terms of the rice. You can try the pre-done one, maybe even the standard rice that you're cooking.
Dan, your microphone's gone a little nuts. It's distorted.
Oh no.
Oh, now it's back. Go ahead.
But is the camera shot on? I don't know. Something's going on here.
You're now at a close-up.
Okay. So this is the one that I was talking about that you want to get if you want to skip the process of making the soup. It's already seasoned, it's already flavored, and it's ready to go straight out of the bottle. So that can help a little bit there. And then this is done. So I want to take it out. And then here's the kombu that I had on top. I'm just going to set that aside, not utilize that again. And then I can turn my rice out. And this was just about 50 minutes for this particular rice cooker. There's different settings on some of them. And this one, we just cooked on the regular setting. And then I'm turning the rice out. Do be careful, it is hot. This is a non-stick bowl for the rice, so it comes out pretty easily. And now what I want to do is try to cool it as quickly as possible. So this is where we come back and we do what's called cutting it. So I'm spreading the rice and I'm taking in this case, it's just a wooden spatula. You could use the plastic one. A lot of people have those at home and they use them for dishing out the rice. We use them for the larger batches that we do in the kitchen here. So a small paddle like this, the plastic or wood, would work perfectly fine. So feel free. And then you're just really trying to break it up. So what you notice as you cut through with the paddle, you're breaking up any lumps that might exist. And this is where the lack of starch will allow the grains to separate completely. And we're trying to just cut it and cool it as quickly as possible. A lot of times there's a little fan here or someone will stand next to you with the fan and cut it to help cool it a little more quickly. And this doesn't have to be done in a wooden bowl. This is designed for making sushi rice. You can pick them up at some of your specialty markets. And we soaked it in a little bit of water, but it'll also help pull out the moisture that's in the rice. So we want to let that steam evaporate as quickly as possible. We want to break up any lumps that exist in there and let it cool as quick as we can. And then what I'm going to do is just take the soup that I prepared. I'm going to pour it right back into the cup that I had. Yummy. And I didn't have any trouble getting rid of any large lumps. So I don't have any big balls or clumps of rice here. Now I just sprinkle some of the soup. And this is up to you. Everybody's a little different in terms of how much flavor you want in the rice itself. I'm not putting all of it in the first try. I'm just putting in about half, coming back again and cutting it. And you'll see I'm kind of using a motion that comes through from the side and just sort of slices through it, gently breaking it open so that soup can drain through. And then if there's some in the center or from the outside, I bring to the center and then I cut it in. And if you have any other questions, feel free, Lonnie, to shoot. And then I'm going to also spread this out one more time. It's still nice and warm. I can feel it. I didn't want to have a fan here because it might make a little too much noise, but that is an option at home, or if you're somewhere where there's good air ventilation, helps.
I do have a question from Ingrid. She wants to know, would you rinse brown rice too if using it to make sushi?
Yeah, absolutely. Any rice that you're going to use, you're going to want to wash it and get as much starch off as possible. A lot of your brown rices will have a fair amount of starch. We've also done this with a combination half and half. We do most of our rice here, actually, we cook is what we call it hopper rice. It's half brown, half white rice. And I think a lot of folks are doing that at home. It's a good way to get brown rice into the diet. Makes it a little bit healthier. You get that fiber, but you'll still have the starch. So you do want to wash that. Yeah, great question. Okay, so what we do now, it's all incorporated. I didn't use all of it. I used about 90% of it. And I do want to taste it just to make sure it's where we need it. And then I would let this cool. It does need to thoroughly cool before we start to make our rolls. So since we don't have a lot of time for that, I already have a batch here. I'll bring that over and we'll be able to work with the rice that's already finished. So this is great for parties or gatherings. This is kind of where the fun starts, right? I mean, the cooking of the rice, the washing and the preparing of it's critically important to having good hand rolls and good sushi in general. But when you can start to get creative with the different ingredients is when I think a lot of people start to have a really good time with this process. So let's look at some of the things that we have here for fillings. Completely up to you what you're utilizing. I picked up a couple items at the store because I really wanted to have the radish sprouts today. But we had crab meat already in the kitchen, so I utilized that, mixed it with a little bit of mayonnaise, which is just kind of to bind it together. You could probably go with it straight, but a little bit of binder in there helps a lot to hold it together. We had some cream cheese that's got like cheddar cheese and jalapenos in it. This is not traditional, but I like it. And I said, hey, I'm going to try that. So I made one earlier. I gave one to my wife. She didn't like it. She's like, that's cream cheese. So, you know, not everybody's going to like the same thing. And that's the beauty of it. If you lay out a tray of assorted fillings before you get into the building of it, it can be the vegetables. It can be meat, beef slices, medium rare, however you like your beef would work. Of course, any of your fresh fish would work great. Salmon or tuna, any shellfish would work that's cooked would be good. You even have the imitation. You could go with tofu-based items, whatever. The sky's the limit. Fresh greens, baby greens are really popular, make things look really nice and fresh and beautiful. What I would say is really important is that you know, if you have an item like a green or a vegetable, make sure that you keep it cold. You don't want it to be warm, limp, room temperature with the warm or room temperature rice. You want to try to get a little bit of contrast in textures and contrast in temperatures. So, you know, hand rolls like maki rolls are ideal, made to order fresh and served. So that's what we'll sort of work on here. So that's the bulk of what I have. I have some pickled daikon. I sliced up some peppers. I have some red and some yellow, some pickled cucumber. I blanched a couple pieces of asparagus and cut them to length. And all of these are about 2 inches in length. Really popular to have cucumbers. So this is just a English cucumber that I cut in 2-inch pieces. I took the seeds out and I like the skin on. It's not that thick and it gives it a little bit more color and it holds some, again, that texture, right? It holds it shape and doesn't allow the cucumber to become limp. Here I had a little bit of choy sum. It was actually flowering, which was really nice. So I've got some pieces there and then some carrot that I cut 2 different ways. If you're going to do it raw, I'd recommend you go with a nice thin cut. You can use a mandolin or your French knife, just cut it really thin, and then you don't have to blanch it. If you're going to use a larger piece of carrot like this, you're going to want to blanch it. That means to par cook it in boiling water, take it out, cool it in ice water or cold water, and then chill it, and you can use it. But if you get too big, it might be a little too firm, a little too fibrous. So that's the assortment of things that we have to work with today. We got about 15.
Dan, are you able to take questions as you make sushi?
Yeah, go ahead, because we're done now, and now it's really more just it's the same process for every cone sushi that we make. So hand roll. So it's I'll just repeat it maybe 3 or 4 times and take questions throughout the process. So yeah, fire away.
Okay, couple of questions. Colleen and also Marianne wanted to know, why do you want to cool the rice?
Well, you don't want any steam coming off of it. When we move on to the nori, which is our seaweed sheets, right? Which I have here. And I picked these up today. So I opened the bottom. Just at times there, I think every supermarket in Hawaii. I thought these were the half sheets. I meant to get those because that's what we need for cone sushi, the hand rolls that we're doing. But this was, read the package. Don't be like me and just look at the size and assume that it's half sheets. This is a full sheet that's folded in half. And we want this to be crisp, right? I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. It's like a sheet of paper. And if we have steam and hot rice that we put on here, it's going to make it soggy really, really quickly. We're already going to get the nori is going to absorb the moisture from the rice and become soft, which is, again, like I said earlier, why we want to make these as fresh as possible, so that when you bite into it, you've got that crunch of the nori or the seaweed on the outside, maybe the crunch of the cucumber, but the softness of the rice, the softness of the fish or the crab salad or whatever you're putting inside. So the main reason is to make sure that it's not cooking the fish or making the nori soggy.
Another question from anonymous person. I thought you are not supposed to wash the rice too good because you could lose some nutriments.
You'll definitely lose nutrients, yeah. But you do want to remove the starch. So there, depending on the rice you buy, there are some rices that have nutrients added. It's just like the breads that we buy have niacin and thiamine and things like that in it. Actually, it's in the flour that we buy as well. So you do have vitamins that are added to some rices, not all, but some. And you would be washing them off, yeah, for sure. But we've got to get that stripped down if we're going to make nigiri, especially like we'll do next week. Hand roll is pretty straightforward, but you would just be gummed up. You wouldn't be able to do it. So yeah, there is probably a little sacrifice there. That's a great question. But it has to be done in order to do the process that we're looking at here.
Arlene wanted to know, can you leave out the combo?
Yeah, absolutely. You could leave it out of either one, or you could throw in another seaweed. I mean, this is where I would say it's important to be creative and throw caution to the wind sometimes. I mean, you could slice a mushroom and put it in there if you like the flavor of a mushroom. I've got pickled ginger that I'll show you when we do the plating, but a slice or sliver of ginger or a sliver of garlic. Same thing with rice. When we cook rice here for certain events, there's a lot of times where we'll put certain items in the rice as it cooks just to give it a light little bit of flavor. So yeah, you can omit that, add something else, or just do the straight up rice, however you'd like. So I have the rice here. This one's already been cooled. I made a few. I made one for lunch, and then I just made one for Alice and a couple samples here to show you. So it's already been done. And this vessel is designed to store rice for a number of hours to be worked in a restaurant or at in the cafeteria in our case, but it doesn't have to be a specialty vessel. It can be in a regular bowl, and then you just a damp cloth over the top so it doesn't get dried out, right? And then you need a bowl for your hands, a bowl of cold water, so you don't get the rice. It will be sticky. You don't want it to stick to your hands. So you want to make sure you get your hands wet. Knock off the excess water. And we don't need a lot. I'm taking maybe about a third of a cup of rice. And I'm only going to cover just about a half, maybe slightly more than a half, or excuse me, slightly less than a half here. And then you don't ever want to squish it together for this particular hand roll. We want it nice and loose. My hands are wet. And then I'm just coming in. I'll try to keep my fingers out of the way so you can see. And I'm just placing it down nice and even. Look at how those pieces just kind of fall and crumble off. So it's not like big clusters and clumps of sticky rice. And then I can flatten it a little bit. Just make sure you keep your hands wet because it will be sticky. And then we're spreading that out. And then we really can turn to what we have over here and select anything. I really like the sprouts or something that gives me a little flavorful and colorful base. The point that's away from me, looking at the camera the way you guys are, it would be the one that's closest to you. That's the point that will be the cornucopia of all of the ingredients that you put in it. So we just have, like I said, that thin little layer of rice, and now I start to build the items that I want. So I'm going to put a little bit of the crab salad in there, and we don't want to overfill it. Don't go too crazy or you won't be able to close it up. You want to be able to make sure that you roll it and get it to stick and stay together. You don't want it spilling out the sides. We're looking for that sort of cone shape. And then it's up to you whatever else you want to put. I'm going to just take some pickled daikon and some red pepper in this case. And you're always thinking kind of the flavor profiles. Sometimes less is more. You don't have to add like 10 or 15 things because the flavors might clash or they might drown each other out. It just depends. So we got a little daikon, the red pepper, the crab with the mayonnaise, and then that peppery sprout would be perfect. So now I'm just going to roll it up. So I know that's the point that I built the cornucopia that's going to like be what we're showing. And I just take the other corner that's closest to me and bring it over. And I'm really almost just folding it into a triangle in a sense, if you can sort of see that. And then that rice wraps around and comes back down to where the nori sheet is. And now the rice is connected to the rice from either side. And I just continue on. Right on to the end. Now, some people will serve it like this. You can put it on a plate or a platter like this. You can close it up. Sometimes some people will take a little bit of water and put it on here to close it up. Another little trick, people will take just a small grain or two of rice and press it on the sheet on the corner. And then as you wrap that around, it really works as your glue of sorts, right? And then they make different little stands. Steve had one here, which is kind of cute. So I borrowed it from him. And then this is designed to just sort of hold your hand roll if you're cone sushi, if you're serving like in a restaurant or whatnot. So this would hold 3. We'll make a couple more and go through the different ingredients. And I'll show you some of the ones that I've made already. Actually, I can pull these up as I'm making them so that we have them as a reference and take any questions that you guys have at this time.
I have a question from Judy. She wants to know the grade of Nodi do you recommend?
The grade?
Yes.
That's a great question. I didn't check the grade on this one. I have lots of different kinds. I borrowed from Steve's stash. I hope he's not watching tonight. But there's a bunch of different ones. It's all roasted seaweed, but I didn't ever notice, to be honest, whether or not there's grades. But it makes sense that there are. I'm looking at these 3 different brands, and I don't see any form of grading on there. So that's a really good question. I couldn't tell you specifically. I don't look for a particular grade, but that would be something worth looking at. Alice, I don't know if you could see if there's a different grade. Or maybe someone that's watching would know what the grading system is. So I know the grading system for meats and things like that, but I'm not familiar with the grading system for the sheets of nori.
Clarita has the question, are the green veggies cooked?
Great question. The asparagus was blanched, as I mentioned. The peppers are raw, cucumbers are raw. The pickled items, obviously, we pickled some things a couple of weeks ago, so those are basically cooked in a sense. These particular greens, the choy sum, I took just the tops and the tender parts, so I'm leaving them raw. If I was to use the base, I would have to blanch it. It would be because those stems are about the size of an asparagus. If I'm using just regular salad greens, here's some red oak leaf, some red leaf. Here's the tops for the choy sum with the flowers. I split them in half, so they're really delicate and tender, so I don't need to blanch them or cook them. There's some green leaf in there, some frisee. You can just buy a mix or use whatever your favorite lettuce is. Even just, Steve was telling me it was really popular. They would just use red leaf, cucumber, and they'd put on a little bit of their special ume sauce. So that would work great and was really popular. We'll probably do something like that next week with the maki rolls.
And could you walk people through the rolling technique one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to do a couple more and then I think we'll be about out of time. And I didn't mention, but you can see this is the shiny side. There's two sides. You can sort of see it. That's a bit more dull. And then this is a lot shinier. Or you might say that one side is smooth and one side's a little bit more rough. We want the smooth side down. The rice goes on the rough side, or the less shiny side, the matte side. So a little bit of water again, about a third of a cup of rice. And then I just kind of let it fall on the sheet. And you can see I'm doing just slightly less than half.
Question about the Nodi leftover. How do you, from Eva, how do you store leftover Nodi to keep it
Great
crispy?
question. Yeah, it needs to be dry, and they'll all come with the silicone pack inside to help keep them from absorbing the moisture. Even an hour out at room temperature, when it's humid out, becomes a problem. So you want to keep them dry. So I would put it in a Ziploc bag after that and room temperature. Just keep this packet with it. And then even then you'll find that they can tend to get a little bit old. They'll lose their shiny appearance and the color starts to fade. What you can do, Steve showed me today, to just brush it over the flame, but it's still not the same. So when you buy the nori, you want to make sure that you're using it, within a couple of weeks of opening it.
Just a couple of more questions. Barb, how did you prepare the combo again? Did you pre-soak it? Have you used
For this one, I did not. No, I just threw it in the rice. It was just a small piece, about 1.5 inches square, and I boiled it with that. And then the same with the soup. And then that was just removed shortly after. So some people may choose to soak it, but it's not necessary. Great question. So here you can see I've got one more sort of structured. So we've got the strip, which is a half sheet. Now they're always in a standard size sheet, and then you just cut them in half. Shiny side down, about a little less than half of the sheet covered with rice. And I don't know if it's easier for me to turn it this way or another way at an angle. And then we just roll it up. So again, I tend to keep my hands a little damp. I always keep a damp cloth handy as well. And then what I want to do is bring this edge in line with this edge. So it's basically like a triangle in a sense, right? I guess to simplify it. So I'm folding this over, and you can see that rice will come into contact with the other rice on that triangled edge. Try to get my fingers out of the way like that. And then we're just rolling it up. And like I said, if you wanted to leave it like that, you can do it. But the ideal is that you're making them and then you're passing them off for folks to eat, or you're making them and then you're eating them yourself. You don't want them to sit too long. And I'll show you these other ones here because the nori will start to get damp, as we talked about, and then it shrinks and it loses its crispness. It will hold the item together really nicely, but it doesn't, it doesn't have that texture that a lot of people look for. So like these I've made earlier, and they have tightened up, they've shrunk up a little bit. Still perfectly good to eat. It's like getting a musubi in the supermarket or 7-Eleven. The nori is soft. It doesn't have the crisp texture. But if you make that fresh and eat it right away, you still get the crispness from it. And then I'll try and make one more so I can fill this cone. I'll show you guys how to cut it really quick. If we have time, Jackie, you've got a couple minutes.
You still have 6 minutes, Dan. You can
Oh.
even answer the remaining 4 questions.
Okay, that's perfect. So here's where I thought it was half sheets, but when you take it out of the packet, you'll see that it's a full sheet, and that's the standard size sheet. So next week we'll do some probably primarily half sheets, but we may do something that requires a full sheet. And if it's fresh, you should be able to fold it in half and just pinch it. And if it's crisp enough and fresh, and I just bought this today, so it should break. You can kind of hear it crunching. It should break in half.
Arlene has a question. She wants to know, why do you cut the rice rather than scoop it and lift?
Rather than scoop and lift. Oh, that's a great question. That's the folding technique when baking. What we're doing is trying to just, when we cut it, you go through it almost like a knife so that there's no mounding or mashing. If we were to scoop it, it's not going to ruin your rice for sure. But what you'll end up with is a clump that's going to come down and land on top of more rice, and you end up with the ball. So the whole idea in that process is to come through and keep it as separated and flat as possible and not mounding up at all. So that's just the easiest technique in the traditional method. But if you're folding it, it's certainly not going to ruin your rice.
Clarita wants to know, where do you buy the wrap stand?
Oh, that's a great question. I would look online, and you may find a place locally, or talk to your favorite uncle who works in the wood shop. Easy to make one. Might be a good small business. But maybe a restaurant supply. I know there's a Bar Green Ellison on Sand Island where we get a lot of our stuff, but I'm not really sure where these came from. But they are really nice and cute. So they work well. Here I'm going to just do some cucumber. And go ahead if you have another question.
Colleen, is it true that the rice producer put pesticides on the rice when they pack it to keep the rice from being eaten by rodents and insects in shipping?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I hope not. Because sometimes I don't wash my rice. So if there's pesticides on it, I think I'm in trouble. I would imagine that that's regulated, but honestly, I can't answer that. It's one thing I don't know. Maybe someone could look that up and get back to you on that.
Okay. Question, can you use regular salmon or tuna from supermarket? Or does
yeah, absolutely. Anything you want, really. Honestly, I mean, you could put drained beef noodle soup in the middle of this if you wanted to. Totally up to you. So anything is, the key tonight was kind of address the rice, because we're going to use that 2 weeks. We'll do a review next week, and then do some simple cone sushi, the sushi sue. But like I said, if you're in a hurry and you don't have time, you can get the seasoned rice vinegar that's already done. And then the fillings are totally up to you. So anything you want to fill it will work fine. So I'll turn this one around so maybe you can get a different view of it. So again, I've got all of the ingredients filled. I just did cucumber, pepper, some of the jalapeno cream cheese, some of the flouring choy sum, and I'm going to roll it up. So this edge comes to meet this edge just by folding it over like that. And then it really creates a cone already, you can see, and you just follow it through and it does the roll like that.
One last question from Arlene. Can we have the recipe or the ume sauce next week?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And then as we wrap that up, normally, of course, when you're serving it, you're going to want to decide what you want to put with it. But traditionally, we'll use wasabi. And you can buy it already finished in the produce section. It's already got the water. It's ground dried. And they call it prepared wasabi. So it's already mixed into a paste. So this has been in the cooler for a while, so it might not be as bright green as normal. And then you also have a little bit of the ginger And you can buy it in jars. There's a lot of different formats for it. Sushi Ginger, they call it. And it's usually young ginger that's thinly sliced and pickled. Slightly tart, slightly sweet. It's almost on the side of every dish you get. This one does not have the dye, so it's not pink in color. But most of the ones that, well, you're seeing more of this today, but this is the same product. It just doesn't have the pink dye added to it. So a couple slivers of that on the plate, serving it would be great. And then of course, if you want some soy sauce, however people like it, you could use even thicker sauces, Thai chili sauce, and you know, the sky is the limit on the direction that you can go. And then the last thing I would say is there's the option for powdered wasabi, and you can get that. Usually it's in a small can, like the powdered dry mustard in the spice department. And it's just 100% ground wasabi that you hydrate with water, mix it up, and it creates its own paste. So be careful. It does, you know, it doesn't last forever. There's usually an expiration date on it. It'll just start to get lose its flavor a little bit. So keep an eye on that. I would recommend, you know, this is actually a larger tube. They make a smaller one. It's what we have at home. It's better to keep it fresh. So just get a small tube already prepared, and it's easy and ready to go. All right, were there any other questions, Lonnie?
No, that was it.
All right, well, great. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We're excited to be able to bring you some of the cultural perspectives on cuisine. They seem to be really popular with what we've been doing. I apologize for the computer. I got to get with IT and figure out what's up and why we keep fading in and out. But we appreciate everybody tuning in, and I appreciate Jackie and everybody at AARP for supporting us. And I want you to stay safe out there. It's getting a little crazy. So aloha and have a great night.